Kia ora everyone, welcome back to the channel, and today we are going to colour in Country Kitchen Charm by Teresa Goodridge. I've been on a real Teresa Goodridge kick this month, so I'm just in the mood to colour another one of her pages, and I found this gorgeous page with a whole bunch of herbs and it's just calling out to me, so I've decided I'm going to colour in this spread here. Now, the one reason that I've been doing a lot of Teresa Goodridge this month is because her line art and also the Creative Haven books being single-sided really lend themselves well to being coloured with water-soluble markers. And so with my hands being quite sore at the moment, I've been doing a lot of marker colouring, and Teresa Goodridge's line style I feel just really suits this technique. So because I wanted to colour another one, I thought, why not bring you along? We'll see how we go with this. I don't do a lot of this style of tutorial video process. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see how we go, because I also can't tell you exact colours of what I'm going to use, because these Crayola Supertips do not have colour names, as do not have most of the other water-soluble markers that I have. So yeah, I have a selection of water-soluble markers. I have the Supertips, I have the 100 box set. I also have the colours of the World set that has a lot of beautiful browns that I can pull out if need be. I also have these dual-tipped brush pens, but these come in like some really nice pastel tones. So I've got that set nearby just in case I need that. And then I also have this set of brush markers. This is by a brand called Unity, which is found at the warehouse in Aotearoa, New Zealand. However, their Unity products are basically what are called like white label products, so products with no branding on it. Then a company will come in and just chuck their branding on. So these are not particularly fancy brush markers by any means, and I'm sure even just showing them, you already recognize the barrel style. They're very common style of brush markers. So, but I do like the color range and the little tin comes in. And then, as well as my water-soluble markers, I also have some fine liners. So those dual, the brush markers I just showed you from Unity also have a fine liner side. I have my Staedtler fine liners in the 36 pack. This is all I could access here. I would love to get the full range eventually. And then I also have these little ones here that I found at, again, the warehouse, or the warehouse stationery, which is the office version. But the store is that combines the two of them, so I don't know why they distinguish it. It's the whole thing. The warehouse is kind of similar to, I think, Target here in New Zealand. I think that's kind of an equivalent, but yeah, it's called the warehouse. It's a warehouse full of products. But anyway, we've got these fine liner kits. They come in regular bright, but then they also come in some pastel tones. So these are on special, and I just thought I would pick them up to try. And then the other thing that we will need is I have some scrap paper here. So we're going to keep using this sheet here because it's been working well. We're going to add this behind so that if these bleed through, they do not affect the next page. And then I also have a little tester sheet here that I can use to test out colours, because again, these pens don't really have a colour chart, but I also like to test as I go along and just see how things blend together. Now, in terms of plans for colouring this page, the only things I know right now is because we've got these herbs front and centre, I want to do some really lovely bright greens. I did pull up some references of how some kitchen herbs kind of look on my computer, just to kind of give me some ideas but it's mostly a lot of bright greens. Obviously we've got some lemons, some pears, some oranges and apples and grapes down here, so that also kind of gives us a set colour here. So we're going to start with the things that I know the colours of, so the plants, the fruit. I think I want to do the wood, the frame around the windowsill, natural wood colours. And then the rest of it we'll figure out as we go along, because that's usually how I operate these sort of things. Yeah, we're going to start with our brighter green. Now, ideally, we'll have enough greens that I don't have to do the same green on every single plant, but if need be, sorry, my throat's kind of going to. Need be, we'll use some similar colours, but it'll be nice to have a variety of tones just to add some dimension. There's a lovely, very bright green. That's some more cooler tones, so that'll work as a shadow. I know we're also going to need a bit of a desaturated green for the sage. That will work for sage, because sage is a lot more on the grey-green side than the bright appley green. So yeah, those two are going to work really well for sage, so we'll keep those out. Apologies, I'm having a bit of a throat day today. My mother is also unwell right now, and I feel like I am also coming down with something again. It happens. That actually works quite well with that bright green. But it's a really light green. Oh, you're pretty. You're very light. I think we'll start with these two, and then we can always add in more, which we're probably going to do. Oh, goodness me. Yeah, I'm getting a little under the weather, as you might be able to tell. I'm also still figuring out the lighting situation, so right now I've got a lot of backlighting going on, so hopefully the shadows aren't too bad. It's going to take time for me to find how to work with the light in here. Alright, so we're going to start with our darker green, and I'm going to work on the basil here. So for the basil, I just want to bring the darker green along the center where the dark of the leaf is. So I'm almost, it's not quite stippling it in, but I am just working in very short, small strokes. So we've got a little bit around the center, and then we've got a bit of a shadow from the leaf on top. That's about all we need to do. So again, we'll just follow the center. I'm trying to not keep my lines perfectly smooth, and I'll explain that when we get into the next color, but I'm actually trying to almost, it's almost like stippling. I want to have an uneven line, and you can add in some extra dots or bits and pieces just to make sure that that line is not solid and consistent. We don't want a line like that. We want a line with variations and gaps and dimension. This is kind of a technique where I kind of just make it up as I go along, so it's going to be interesting to try and explain this technique, but hopefully I will be able to explain it. If things aren't clear, as per always, please let me know and I'll do my best to explain it. Just something that I found works for me, particularly when my hands aren't feeling very great. And it's also kind of quick as well. I think this will be my 4th Teresa Goodridge Pages month so far. I've just really been enjoying this technique. And once you get the hang of it, you can not only work fast, but it also kind of helps you be looser. So I slowed it down a bit there, but now we're just gonna, and again, we're not going for a perfectness. We're not trying to be controlling and purposely evenly placed. We want variation. That's pretty much all in shadow down there. You want to be loose, and this is why I feel like Teresa's line work really suits us, because it is quite loose. Alright, so there's our dark green. So we're going to give that a moment to just almost set. The water-soluble markers, you know, if you just give them a moment, they almost settle into the paper and dry in the sense of an alcohol marker. So while that one's drying, let's do the sage, and I'm going to do the same thing with the darker green up here, the darker grey green. I'm just going to focus on darkening the centers, and then anywhere there's an overlap, I'm going to put a little bit of a shadow. If I was being like really pedantic about light sources and things like that, the shadowing would be a little bit different, but I'm not being that pedantic because this is just about having fun, so I'm not being that pedantic. There we go. So as you can see, it works quite quickly when you kind of get it down. So while we wait for that one to dry, we will go back to our basil. We're going to work with our bright green now. So here, I'm actually going to work over the entirety of the leaf, including where we put that dark green. So using the side of the pen, which gives us a flatter, thicker surface, just taking a leaf at a time, working quickly, you can get quite a smooth layer without too much streakiness. If you do get some streakiness, don't worry about it too much, because we're actually going to work over this again. But the point here is we want to add in a full layer of this beautiful bright green. So when I was doing the centers, I was working with the pen more vertically and almost stippling using the tip, because I want to color a flat surface. I'm using the side of the marker. You can see how my hand position changes when I use the side. I tend to hold it up more with the tip resting in my hands like this. It allows me to have the control and work those flat areas. But then when I am trying to do a more stippling technique, we're working more carefully towards the front, so I can have more specific dot control, whereas here gives me a smoother motion for colouring. Right. Now before this one sets too much, we're going to actually go back in with the exact same colour. This time we're working more with the tip and that dotting technique. And what I'm doing here is I'm using this as a blender. When you layer a colour you've already used on top of itself, it will darken. So I'm going to add this in between. So where our dark green is, extend those lines out and focus on dotting around our leaf to create a more gradiated blend. So this is definitely stippling here. I'm literally just dotting it in. Just dot, 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 dot. Focusing on that center and that shadow and just trying to blend out those two colors. And because we're doing this while it's still a bit damp, the color we apply is almost going to bleed out slightly. So it'll just help with that blending difference. And if we had done that with the dark green, it would have really spread out quite far. and we needed to almost control it. Sometimes I work it when it's still wet to get more wet on wet. Sometimes I leave it to dry. It will reactivate slightly with the lighter, brighter green coming on top, but it won't be as intense as if I worked on this right now. If I put a dot on this right now while it was still wet, it would just like spread out quite a bit. Hopefully I'm not blocking too much. I'm also trying to keep conscious of my hand position, which means like I want to work like this. But this completely blocks the view of what you're seeing. So that works a lot quicker for me because it's the natural position and how I usually colour when I'm not recording. But because I'm recording, I am working a little bit more on the side than I would like to of this pen. But I'm also trying to be conscious and not block your view, because I do that a lot when I'm filming stuff. And especially because right now the lighting isn't 100%, but I will figure it out eventually. It's just going to take time and playing and placement, and lighting's not my strong suit. Yeah, if you need to darken anywhere, you can go back over it again. You can just keep layering, and even with one color, you can build up quite a variation in tones. I'm just going back over the center, adding in a couple of dots. You can see I'm not really like sitting there and carefully dotting like this. I'm just kind of boom, 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 boom. Yes, the sound effects help. So yeah, you can see already we've got some basil leaves entirely coloured. We've got some dimension in there. It is still, even though it's got dimension, it's still kind of flat. So there is something that we're going to do to this as well. But again, we're going to leave that lot to dry. So we'll come back to our sage, and we're going to do the exact same thing here. We're going to use our light grey green. These are looking very grey, however. Okay, our sage is actually looking grey now instead of green. That's okay, we can fix this. I'm just going to continue doing our flat colour, and I'm not going to build up our mid-tone right now, because what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to layer another green over top of that, a really bright green. Might even use the bright green we used down here, and just see if I can warm this up slightly. Try. Yeah, you're too dark and too cool tone. I really do wish Crayola Supertips would number or label their pens so I could effectively work out colours. I think that's the colour I want to work with. Again, I want to have a slight variation. It is more of a cooler grey green. So, how are we? It's still a little damp. Yeah. I think we're alright now. It doesn't take long. You just tap on it. You can usually feel. Yeah, no, that's alright. Alright, so I just worked slowly in that first section because I just wanted to double check. But we're good. So now I'm just going to work an entire layer of this green over the grey to make a slightly more green into our grey. Now when I laid down the grey, I didn't even like fully colour in all of the leaf properly. That's okay. We're going to be dotting over this. And in this case, I also worked over it with the green. So it just creates some highlight areas for this slightly more mint green. Let's say mid. So now while it's still got that dampness, we will use a bit of that grey. I am going to work very carefully and very lightly here and not do quite as many, just because this is quite a bit grey, but we do want to add in a bit of a blend. And then we'll take that brighter bluish green teal colour and add that on top. So this is where we're working very wet on wet. And those colours that we just dotted on will blend out a bit more with this green. There we go. Right. And now, I didn't turn my zoom on, that was smart. And you on so I can zoom you in if I want to. Oh, give it a minute to work itself out. Alright, so now let's go back to our basil. There we go. Now it's started to figure itself out. Look at that. I can bring you in a bit more. Oh, you're looking very green on camera. I mean, very grey on camera. You can see a bit of the green on the camera. Hopefully it's not too grey. I promise it has sort of like a grey, green, teal colourway. Alright, so now what we're going to do is we're going to just add a bit more depth to our basil. And I want to find the lightest grey that I have. We've got these two that are pretty light. And that's going a bit dark. One's cooler and one's warmer. We're using this as shadow, so I actually think this slightly cooler grey. You can't see it all. But this colour here is what we're going to use. Slightly cooler grey. And this is going to just help define some of those shadow areas. So I don't want to put it everywhere we put that darker green. But I want to focus around areas that would have a bit of natural shadow, such as here. This leaf is very recessed in. There would be shadow there. We've got this leaf here that would have a cast shadow from this leaf on top. Same within here. Same within these little bits in here. So just a little bit in the centers where the joins overlap. And you can see that already we're just getting a little bit more dimension to these leaves. Yeah, just that little touch of grey, and already we've got a bit more dimension. And that's our basil leaves done. So you can actually pull out fine liners and like create more veins on the leaves and add in more texture that way if you wanted to. I can't be bothered. So I'm not going to. Right, let's look at the rosemary, which is right next to it. And for the rosemary, I'm going to use the same tealish green that we went over the sage with. I'm going to use that as our base green. So this time I'm just going to fully colour in everything. I am working with the side instead of trying to work this way and get a really thicker line by working this way. I'm working this way up towards the tip on an angle, and it creates more thinner lines. And I'm doing this because rosemary is kind of a bit of a spiky plant. So by following the texture of the plant and those spikes, if there is any streakiness created from these being water-soluble markers, it will actually just look like more texture of the plant rather than, you know, streakiness from the markers. That's another little tip with water-soluble markers. Work them in a way that matches the texture of what you're colouring. So if I'm doing stones, for example, I use a lot of stippling on stone because stone has often quite a porous texture or a lot of dents and bumps. So I tend to stipple. On spiky plants, I do a lot of streaky colouring, for lack of a better word. I do a lot of lines to match the texture of the plant. For wood, I also work with a lot of lines, all going in the same direction to match the grain of the wood. All right, and then, yeah, so this is the darker green that we used on the basil, and we're going to use it on the rosemary too. It will keep it a little bit more consistent as we move across because we've used the same greens without keeping it identical. So again, I'm working in the streaks and I am focusing on, I have just realized that I accidentally colored in part of the sign here. So I'm just going around the sign edges so I know very clearly where it's actually sign. Luckily those areas are kind of recessed anyway, so it works. Right. So back to working in our little streaks. Again, I'm working from the center and just adding in some streaks, some lines to represent that texture. Now I want to focus this on certain areas. So here we have one rosemary stalk going up here. We've got another one here that raises up this way. So for this one that's behind, I've added in a few darker streaks here, and now where the overlap is, I'm going to darken that up to help create that texture and dimension. This is where I find, because Teresa is very gestural, I guess, like doesn't specifically sit there and draw every single little stalk of the rosemary bush and every little, it's a sprong, every little bit of it basically. She just sort of gestures it, and you can gesture it in the colouring too, and it still reads. So yeah, it's why I quite like this technique for colouring in Teresa. So I'm going to speed up now and show you how I would do it. You can see I kind of go very quickly. I try not to slow down and think about it normally. Like, I'm doing it for the sake of this recording, but when I'm colouring, I just go for it because I also find that instinctually I just do it. If I stop to question it, it doesn't quite work out right. Just play, just go for it. Trust your instincts, you know? All right. And then the same thing again. Once that's a bit more dry, we will add in a little bit of grey just to darken a couple of areas. But there's our rosemary done. Right, now the reference picture I'm looking at doesn't have mint, but it does have parsley. And once again, we've got very similar colours for the parsley as per the basil. So, what do you like? Let's try you out. Oh yeah, you're the more blue one. No, we want this one. We want the warmer one. So we're going to follow the same technique that we did on the basil as for the parsley. Except this time I'm also going to colour down the the stalks. The basil seems to have more of a yellowish tone to its stalk, so I'll colour that later. But the parsley, the green comes all the way down. We're going to start with our centres where it's a bit darker. Keeping in mind if there's any overlap areas, adding in that shadow from the leaf on top to help distinguish. You know, with how much I've said Shadow, I half expect Shadow the cat to turn up in here. But I believe he's fast asleep on my bed right now. Right, let's not colour in the sign this time. And see, around here it gets very loose, especially because we've got the frame of the window behind here, and some of it's been drawn through, so I tend to just place colour down. My preference here is whatever will make the next part easier to colour. I don't want to sit there and have to like fiddly colour around each of these leaves, so I'm just like, yeah, we'll make that leaf, we'll make that leaf. Again, this is also one of my sort of more lazy colouring ways. I say lazy with like an asterisk next to it because it's not lazy. It's a technique that works very fast for me, but also is very comfortable for me when my hands are sore, and my hands have been really sore these last couple of days. Again, I do really suspect I'm getting ill. I can tell my throat is going. I've been coughing a lot. I really have not been feeling too a flash today. And considering how unwell my mum is again right now, yeah, not good. So, but that's what happens when you have two people that get sick very easily living in a house. One will get sick and the other ones get sick. Yeah, I'm not surprised that I'm starting to feel unwell. I'm just hoping it doesn't progress to another chest infection. Okay. Before that dries out too much, again, we're going to use this and start our little stipple. Bring this around. So in some of these areas, I've even gone over the edge of the parsley. It's fine. Again, because of the loose gestural nature of a lot of these plants, it's very possible that there are additional little bits of leaf and stuff that are outside these lines. That's how overspill just kind of reads to me in this situation. Go with the flow and have fun with it. So we're about 30 minutes in and have almost 4 of our plants done, which for me, that's kind of quick. Like some people may look at that and go, that's not very quick. For me, that's pretty quick. Like I've been known to spend 88 hours I spent 18 hours colouring stone one day. I spent 8 hours colouring clouds. Like I'm known to take my time with objects. Right, so back to our cool light grey, and you know the deal. We're going to add in our very deep points on our rosemary, focusing on those areas where our branches overlap, where we have that distinction and we need to create that distinction, where we need to add that depth and that variance. And in the meantime, our parsley is basically dry, so we can, while we've got it out, do the same thing over here. Just help recede back some of those areas, which will help bring some leaves forward. You can also use Posca to really highlight some of these leaves, and I may do that towards the end if I feel like it, but I don't always do that. Right, I do want to just take this green a little bit more down here because I think I missed that leaf when I was doing the blend out initially. Maybe this one too. Don't look particularly blended. There we go. Again, we're not going for a perfect blend. We're just going for the illusion of a blend. Alright, what else does my reference have that's in this picture? I do have thyme. And thyme is, again, bright. We're going to use the same combo on our thyme. Our chives are even lighter, so I'm actually thinking we're going to work with our very, very light green and use that to really create some light. And then don't have dill and I don't have mint on this reference, so I might have to quickly look those two up, but that'll give us at least a couple that we can do. So same thing again. So because we're doing one of these more streaky plants, we're going to start by doing all the bright green for a solid layer first. Yeah, frame. And back to our brighter green to help blend that out. The tip on this brighter green is starting to already dull down a bit, and that's the one big issue I have sometimes with these. Again, if you need more controlled, delicate fine lines, that is where using a fine liner can become very handy. We can also add some of that definition back in a little bit with our grey. Easy peasy. So I am noticing when I did the first pass, I did miss a few sections. So I am now just going to go back in, kind of work over most of it, but just extend it out and make sure we're getting all those little edge bits. You can kind of do that here because it's one of those streaky ones. So if it's just a bit of each side colouring in, the streaks are going to just look like part of the plant texture. If I was doing one of these big leaves, for example, and I missed a section of a leaf, I would probably need to colour in the whole leaf again just to make it look cleaner and flatter. If you just coloured in the section you missed, you're going to end up with a ring where the colours overlap. So just be aware of that. Right, our chives. And so I also want to double check. Now I think this is a lighter grey. Yeah, you are a lighter grey. Apologies, testing off camera. Because we actually fade down to a bit of white. So, don't think that's going to work. However, you pull out these pastel ones. Pretty similar. That might even be better. That will tie in with the green. I'm colouring off camera again. We're just testing. Okay, yeah, I think that will work. So we're going to do a little bit of a gradient in this section here. Let's see if I can find a place to put these brush markers. So with the chives, it's bright green on the end, but then the center has yellow white. So we want to bring this color here. Did this actually have a color name? No. Just a sort of peachy, yellowy, beigey light tone. And so in order to do that, we're going to need to create a gradient. And creating a gradient with water markers can be a little difficult. So what we're going to do if this is our little area that we're trying to create a blend in, we're going to start with our lighter tone and we're going to do a layer to where we want our blend to end. So about halfway. And then working over top of that, about 3/4 of the way up, doing another layer about halfway up, and then 1/4 up. And as you can see, as we go up, we get more intense color. So if you're thinking about this as passes over it, at the halfway mark, we've got 1 pass of the peach, tan, whatever color this is. And then we've got about 2 passes there, 3 passes here, and 4 passes here. So that creates a single tone gradient just by layering more and more of the same color on top. And then for the bottom, it would be the same, just in reverse. So 1 pass, and about 3/4 down, 2 pass, 3 pass, and then 4 pass. So again, we have a gradient. Now, while the center is still wet, we would take our light and just work ever so slightly over our green, keeping in mind that the more layers you add, the more this is going to darken. So if I want to work back over with our green, we have to work over everything. And at this point, it's going to build up too many layers. Same with our peach that we just put back down. We then have to go back across and work over everything to keep it consistent. It's not the easiest thing to do. It is easier to do a blend where you have the 2 colors and then you work wet on wet and you stipple the colors into each other, because the stippling helps create a more effective blend between the 2. So this is how I prefer to blend 2 colors, because it just reads as a better blend due to the nature of you stippling the 2 colors together. Doing a streaky blend like this is not my favorite way. However, it does have its uses to blend like this. Now, with the case of the plant, we're working with something where we have a whole bunch of stems. So this is where it's going to be a little bit more challenging, because it's a small area that we're trying to do a blend of. So I'm going to be streaking upwards with our lighter tone, streaking downwards with our green, and then reworking over the top to add dimension. So it's kind of a mixture of the two. It's a mixture of working in the line gradient, but also similar to the stippling, but it's really just working the lines into each other. I hope that's clear. So something like this I would be more likely to do in a big expansive area like a background. That being said, night skies I tend to, or skies I tend to do with this more stipple effect because I just find it flows better. But this has a place as well, particularly if the colors are really, really similar. Like we're working with two very odd colors here, but if you were to do like dark blue into light blue, it works even better. And then because we're working on the plant, we'll do this more streaky technique. So if we go back to our chives, and with these brush pens, we also have a smaller felt tip on the end, so I'm actually going to use that. Make sure it's closed up properly. All right. Rework that colour in a bit across there. And then rework our green. It does get more intensely green towards the top. Gonna make sure we have our green up there. And in fact, now I'm gonna grab our brighter green that we've been using on all the other ones and really bring that in. Right, so that's created the sort of natural gradient of the chive plant. However, we have no shadows, we have no variances in the colours due to where the actual strands of the chive plant are. We don't have any grey, so we don't have the dimension like we do in the rest of our plants. So this is where we're going to go to our fine liners. Now, question is, do I have a colour that might work? We want neon green, willow green, or lime green. I think we're going to go willow green. So we're going to work with our willow green, and we're going to use this to help really define the strands up here. If there's any little areas that we've missed, we can use it to help fill in those areas around these tops. And of course you can do this on any of the plants as well. But what I'm going to do, so for example right here, this strand is in front. I'm going to take the fine liner behind it. Actually, I think that one's in front and that's behind. My bad, I've just coloured that wrong. Oh wow. Let's add shadow in there. And then if we take this other half of this strand, which is actually in front, and we'll shadow behind that. Obviously in here, this whole section is behind this thing in front. And just sort of flick it upwards to mimic that sort of, if you've ever seen a chive bushel plant, they're like lots and lots and lots of little stalks in a way. They kind of remind me of straws, lots and lots of tubey green things. So yeah, just a little touch and we've already got a lot more dimension. And then you know what we're going to do, of course, grey. So I've pulled out the light grey in the fine liners. And same thing, we're going to use this to help really push things back, which in turn will pull other things forward. So anywhere where there's a bit of a shadow, it will also work for the beigey colour down the bottom, so we can use that all the way through. So I'm going to just take a moment to make myself a cup of tea, have a little break. It has been nearly an hour of me just sitting here sitting, so I like to take a break every hour to help with my mobility. I've done it all the way through live streams. We're going to do it here in this recording. So we're just going to take a little break, and then when we come back, I will carry on with the mint and the dill, and then we'll get started on some of these flowers as well, perhaps. See how we go. Okay, we're back. It's actually the next day, but hey, it happens. So we're going to carry on with the mint and the dill. I have looked up reference pictures, and particularly with the way that this flower here is shaped, it actually has quite a bit of like yellowing at the tip. So we're going to use the same bright green that we've been using throughout, and then I've got a very yellow green and then a yellow itself, plus our dark green as needed. And then mint is also a bit more yellow, so what I'm going to do is not use the actual yellow but the yellow green, the green that we've been using on almost every plant, and the darker green, and that'll work for our mint. So I'm actually going to start with the medium green, just because we can always darken afterwards, but it's hard to lighten. So we're going to follow our usual colouring of the centre with the mint. And because this uses the same techniques, I'll try and do this one a bit faster. While we wait for that to dry for a second, I'm going to take this yellow green and I'm actually going to colour in the stems of the basil plant as well. Oh, excuse me. We're still definitely sick. Alright. Same as before, using this side. That big flat area to colour in. Trying my best to avoid the actual little top of the stand here, but I have coloured that and quite a few other of the leaves and stuff, so we're going to have to go back over it when we get to colouring in those signs, but that's okay. Alright, and then switching to the tip and using that to help blend it out. I'm going to give that a minute to dry, and then I'll come back in with the dark green. There's just a couple of areas I'm going to add the dark green. I don't really want to add a lot of it. I like having this contrast of this brighter yellow green with all the different greens we've got on here. That was one of my main concerns with this, was that we're going to end up with a lot of similar greens, but we're getting a lot of variation. I just realised I haven't turned on my light, so we're getting back shadows. My apologies. Almost like I'm a professional YouTuber. I am so not. Right, it's still going to give me a bit of back shadow, but hopefully that'll counteract it a bit. I'm filming during the day at the moment, which completely changes all the lighting. Okay, so while that dries, we're going to start on our dill. I'm actually going to start with the yellow, and I'm just going to stipple this at the ends of these flowers. A bit further down than I actually want the yellow to appear, but we want to have some extra there to help blend it into our next colour. So focusing on making sure we get the very edge solidly coloured and then just stippling it down. And if I go over the edge a little bit, it's not the end of the world. I'm going to take our yellow green and start stippling that into the plant. Just bringing those dots up, help transition the yellow into our green. Oh, there's one I missed. I had a feeling there was one I missed. Okay, back to the yellow. Again, working wet on wet. Reworking over that initial yellow stippling and that green. Just making sure it's all filled in. Helping blend those two colours together. Back to the yellow green. And I'm going to focus this right at the bottom where the plant becomes stem. I don't really know technical plant names, so hopefully I'm describing things accurately enough that you can understand the areas I'm referring to. And then with our darker green, that's what we're going to use on the stem. So just sort of feathering that into the yellow green that we've worked in. And use that yellow green again to rework over. And that's darker green again, focusing on, especially around the bottom here, that would be darker as it gets more down to the roots. And then I'm going to use my yellow green and just dot it into the plants anywhere I want to deepen that green a little bit, mostly around the stems, focusing on that area. Cool. Alright, I'm going to take this medium green and use it to re-darken up some areas of the mint now that that's all dry. Focusing on those overlaps of leaves. And while that's still wet with our dark green, I'm just going to colour down the stem and here where we've got a triple leaf overlay and a little bit for those really dark areas. Just want to blend that area out a bit because it's a bit intense. Right, we have our grey. No, wait, and make sure everything's dry. That's still a little tacky. So we'll just add in our grey shadow tone. The mint's drying first because there's less added to that. So again, we got a little bit of shadow. I think I'm using the darker green by accident. The darker grey, sorry. Words are hard. I'm definitely getting to that brain foggy stage, which, you know, it's probably a wise idea that I'm recording something where I'm trying to be descriptive when I'm struggling with words. Right, that gives us a little bit of shadow. You're dry now, so I'm going to focus this around the bottom where it would be darker from the pot. We've got two flowers on top of each other here, and it would cast a little shadow on the stem, so I'm just adding that in here. A lot of this wouldn't have too much shadow, but we want a little bit. There we go, there's all our herbs done. The plants themselves, obviously we've still got the pots and the signs and the bits and pieces. So I'm just deciding, now I've currently got all the greens out, so it would be logical to kind of do the rest of the plants and the leaves while we have this out. Just because we've already got the greens pulled, it saves me re-pulling them, and it means that I'm using colours that I would know I've already used on the page. So we will work on the rest of the leaves. So this is the sage colours, and because we've only really used these colours up here, I know I want to pull these down somewhere else. Apple leaves are usually quite bright, so we'll go with our traditional apple, but I think grape leaves can be quite dull, so we might use these colours on our grape leaves down here. I'll start with the apple and pear leaf. See, the pear leaf we can do more on the yellow side. We'll get all three colours in then. Let's start with our apple. And then we'll do our centre of the leaf here. And we're going to need that one for the more green. And then for our dark, it's that same process. We're starting with our darker centre. And also adding in the areas that would be darker. Now I know the stem should probably be more brown on the grapes, but we're just going to do the green. We're going to do this dark grey green because we're here. So yeah, once you get like confident and you know the colours, you can actually work quite a bit at once because you can do multiple sections at once, and that helps speed it up. The picking of the colours is really what takes the longest here. So that's why if I already have the colours pulled, it's quite handy because it saves me having to pull a bunch more colours. Keeping in mind over this green grey, we do have to put another layer of colour. I never closed that one properly, so I hope it's not dried out. We're going to just deepen. Oop, the green was not quite dry, so that's bleeding out quite a bit more than I intended. We can work with that. All right. All right. There's our grape plant. Alright, so we're going to use a more cooler blue-green like we did with the rosemary. I'm going to use it on the centre plant here. Or do I switch it? Because it would be very linear. So it should technically be here. Then we can do the bright green, and then maybe we can do more... maybe we should do yellow-green, yeah? No, because we might bring in yellow, and these look very similar in plants. So what I think we'll do... we'll do the bright green there, and we'll do the cooler greens here. Just double check I have pulled the right colours. You're very similar, so we don't need you. And yes, we've still got to do the grey down here, but we'll come back and do that when we do all the grey. Got to dry for a minute anyway. Alright, so we're doing our darker leaves here. Oh, excuse me. My mum is unfortunately really not well today. Hoping that it will clear for her soon, because it's really not great. Yeah, it's a bit of the sick, taking care of the sick at the moment, but I've at least got a little bit more capability, even if a lot of what I'm doing is like soup. That's pretty much the plan for today. Soup and rest. Make sure we colour in the stems there. Cool. And blend it out. My knuckle wasn't as swollen today, which is nice. I woke up earlier this week and it was actually purple with bruising and swelling. So I don't know if maybe I accidentally bumped it or caught it on something. It's very possible I did. I've been doing a lot of unpacking and sorting of stuff. We are getting there. I'd say I'm about 60% through the unpacking. I've definitely done the majority of the like easier stuff for unpacking. A lot of what's left is things where to put them away. I need to make a home to put them away. So like my kitchen stuff, and that involves actually going through the kitchen with my mum and us working out what we're keeping and what we're getting rid of. And so rather than bring those boxes upstairs, I actually want to go through them downstairs in the garage, and then anything I'm getting rid of I can just put straight to the car to donate. However, we also don't have a car this week because my brother needs to borrow it while his wife's car is in the shop. So at the moment, even if I could sort them, I can't put them anywhere. And I'm realizing that I could spend the time sort of figuring out the organization of this room a bit better. But to do that, I need to actually basically clear out the unnecessary in here, because the boxes that have unpacked that are empty are still sitting in here at the moment, and I feel like that's just sort of blocking me right now because it's clutter. So I just basically need to throw all those boxes downstairs so they're out of the way. But yeah, I just haven't had the energy. All right, let's work on these ones here. So these are a lot of leaves in here, so this will take us a little bit to do all our shadows. Exact same process as we've done all the way around. We're going to start by darkening our center and also darkening anywhere where there may be some leaf overlap. So another thing you can do with this technique too that I've done before is I've actually used alcohol markers to just lay a flat colour on everything, get a nice smooth flat base, and then I just shade with the water-soluble markers. Just use the darker markers to shade it out. You can also shade with obviously the alcohol markers, but the reason I like doing it with the water-soluble in a book like this is because of the size of the details. It can be quite difficult with alcohol markers to do finer shading, so it allows me to sort of get in there and do some more finer shading. I enjoy that. Now I just coloured in that area green. I probably should have done that as the flower, and I'm thinking in here maybe we'll do that as the flower too, and down here we'll have some areas where we may have some more green showing, but we also want to leave room for those flowers to go through. So like this little gap in here we'll do green, because by there pretty much all leaf. And so we'll do it down here too. But then we'll try to leave any other gap as flowers. Like down here can be flowers, that can be a flower. I'll just have to remember when I'm colouring the flowers, I also want to bring those colours down a bit. Alright, I think I've got all the shadow areas, but I'm probably going to go back over and do another layer. And now we'll get our bright green in. Again, working with the side to try and get flat, smooth colour. Oh. Alright, and I'm just going to also colour over these shadow areas, even though it doesn't really do much in terms of... It's not about deepening the shadow, it's just because all the other cooler green here has that warmer green overlaying it, so it just ties it together. we'll give that a minute to dry. And while we're doing that, we'll come back to our grey. We need to add in for our shadow areas. There's not too much in here. Deepening any area. Yeah, those ones are pretty straightforward. In here we'll have a little bit more. I grabbed the wrong one again. The slightly darker one. It's okay. They're very similar, these two greys. One's just slightly cooler, one's slightly warmer. One is slightly darker. So you're dry enough that we can work. Just going to re-darken up some of those areas. And then we'll take our warmer, lighter green, start blending out. Do, 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 do. Alright, same deal. We'll leave that to dry and then we'll put our grey over. And then while we're at it, while we're waiting, we'll get our last lot of leaves done down here. So part of me is tempted to do them yellow like the dill. However, I think I may possibly also do some yellow flowers there. So I think we'll follow the mint colours and do that more yellowy green leaf, and that will help tie that around. Plus we've got our little one there, so we've got a few leaves in here again. We also have the leaves on the jug that I'm not going to colour. Oh, there's a pear leaf I also missed, so we'll colour that at the same time. I'm not going to colour the leaves on this jug here because I may choose to do this jug completely different colours. I don't know the colour that I'm going to do the jug yet, so because of that I am going to leave the jug. But because it is, you know, a jug and not actual plants, if the greens turn out a bit different, that's not the end of the world. So let's just speed through these leaves because you'll know the process now. There's a leaf I added no shadow to. That's okay. We'll go back and add that. Figured there'd be one or two that I might have missed. leaf there? Is that something else? Or a flower? There's some leaves there I missed. I think we're going to turn that into a leaf too. Making sure I got all those shadow areas, especially because I added in some extra leaves as I was colouring in there. Alright, well that does its thing. Come up here with our grey, and particularly these leaves at the back here. Really want to create that depth of layers. A little bit on here, again really focusing on those deep shadows, those leaves that are recessed behind, just to help create 3D texture. And there we go, there is all our herbs and our leaves done. So this is where we will leave part 1. In part 2 we will come back and either work on some of the wood, or maybe we'll do the fruit. I think we'll do the fruit because that will give us some colour ideas, and then maybe we can take those colours into the plants themselves. We'll see. I'm going to take a little bit of a break though. I'm going to go and get a ton of water for my throat, and then I'll come back and continue on recording. So I hope you're enjoying this process and seeing how I colour this page with Crayola Supertips and other water-soluble markers. If you have, please make sure to like the video, give it a thumbs up, leave a comment down below. It really helps boost the algorithm. And if you're not already, hit that subscribe button. Helps me out, and you know, just puts the content out there and it shows it to more people, which maybe somebody else would like to learn about this technique. You never know. But yes, thank you so much for watching. Make sure you take care of yourself. Much aroha or love to you all. And I'll see you all in the next part. Bye!